Jill Castilla, you and your team at the Citizens Bank of Edmond, Oklahoma, were named by American Bankers one of the top banking teams in the country this week. It's the second year in a row. So how did you nab that honor?
Well, we work really hard. We have a great team that orchestrated a turnaround of a 114-year-old institution. We did it in the fastest turnaround in the nation without adding capital, and have turned it into a social media powerhouse, a community energizer, and we're really the community builders in that central Oklahoma region, and have an amazingly innovative team that still is very risk adverse and conservative and doing the right things as a community bank.
Can you talk about the clientele in Edmond, Oklahoma? Are you very much a product of the natural gas industry? Because that industry has gone down, so how's that affected you?
So in Oklahoma, we've always been susceptible to a drop in energy prices. But since the collapse back in the 80s, Oklahoma has become exceptionally diverse and resilient when it comes to a drop in prices. So we've had some, we have a storm in Oklahoma, but it's a survivable one where it wasn't, used to be an F5 tornado coming through and just wiping everything out. Now we have the ability to be more resilient. Oklahomans are very scrappy. We can survive just about anything, and that's what they're enduring through this situation as well.
And as a banker, how have you survived the drop in interest rates? We've seen low interest rates for a long time. Lots of savers are very upset by this. So as a banker, what are you doing to ameliorate their situations?
So bankers have had to be very thoughtful in their expense management. You're right, with savers, that's who this really hurts when this extended low interest rate environment, retirement plans get kind of off-road, and there's a lot more difficulty with especially our older population customers. But we've been able to survive that as a bank. Our bank has been around since the turn of the century and survived some of those oil busts and your Great Depression and Dust Bowls, and we've been able to survive these low interest rates as well.
And you actually served in the Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City. So what's your view on interest rates? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I have no idea what they're going to do. From our region, I think it's time for an interest rate increase, but I've been saying that for quite some time. And the Fed their balance sheet is a lot different now, so they have the ability to affect multiple areas of the curve, not just short-term rates. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in mid and long-term rates where they have some of those investments.
And what about regulation with regard to smaller banks like Citizens Bank of Edmond, Oklahoma? We keep hearing that Dodd-Frank is really pressuring the small banks who don't have as much money or as many lawyers on staff as some of the money center banks here in New York. So how's it affecting you?
Well, the regulation, Dodd-Frank, was well-intentioned, and it was addressing the crisis and trying to find a way in which the government could help control some of the activities that maybe were a little bit aggressive. But on Main Street, we weren't doing those things, and we're sitting on Wall Street right now, and it is just a different world. And we should be able to portfolio mortgage loans and have not the just crushing regulations that come with that. And it doesn't necessarily hurt me as a banker; it hurts the consumer. It makes the process so cumbersome for them. Basel III and international accounting rule applies to my little $250 million bank in Edmond, Oklahoma, where we only just have offices downtown in Edmond. Yeah, I have those same regulations that a big, huge Bank of America or even larger institutions would have to comply with.
And then finally, how do you compete when you see some of the larger banks encroaching on your space? Because, there's a battle for market share across the country, and all of a sudden you see big banks coming onto your block or in your town. So how does a small bank compete?
Yeah, well, I say bring them on. I think competition is great. It forces you to be nimble and scrappy, and that's the community banking industry. That's what we are. We're a bunch of little scrappy, nimble individuals that can survive. And the difference is that community connection, those personal relationships. It's not just about that we're friendlier and that we're nicer, but we know our communities inside and out. We know the oil and gas industry and what impact it can have, and those leading indicators allow us to be a little bit more conservative and be able to weather that storm. And that's the difference between a small bank and a really large institution. But I really don't compete against the large banks in my market. They're doing a lot of great business, but I'm connecting with people, and they get the business that maybe a little bit bigger, that maybe that connection isn't as important, but I've got plenty of business to be had. It's just making sure that we have the regulations to be able to allow as small businesses, that small banks are, to be able to survive and thrive.
All right, well, thanks a lot for talking about it, Jill.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And thank you for watching The Street.